in fact, we are in the final furlong of this historic referendum campaign, and it is in the final furlong that the horses change places.
Let's sing some success together!
Let's win that referendum on June the 23rd. Can we win it? Yeah. I think we can. And I think it's highly appropriate actually that we're here in York, because it was not far from here, I think a couple of hundred yards away, in the early 18th century, or about 1734, I think, or roughly that the people of York decided that they had enough of highway robbery. They were fed up with being fleeced and being told to stand and deliver and to hand over their money week after week without being given any idea how it would be spent. And it was just in the woods over there, I think, that they hanged Dick Turpin. And my friends, I propose tonight that we resolve to rise up and stop sending £350 million per week to Brussels, money over which we have absolutely no control. £10 billion of which we absolutely see no sign of ever again, and it disappears literally in a puff of smoke in the case of the subsidies sent to Greek tobacco farming, or I discovered the other day, some of it actually goes to support the grazing for Spanish bullfighting. Now, do you think that British taxpayers' money should be going to support Spanish bullfighting? No. I think it's okay. Do you not think that it might be more useful to spend that on supporting the NHS here in this country? I certainly do. Let's take back control of our funding. Let's take back control of our borders. And I thought Harsinrat and Gordon spoke eloquently about that just now, about having a sensible immigration policy so that we can look after the people of this country and make sure that they're properly trained and that the businesses of this country have the skills that they need. And of course, above all, take back control of our democracy. Because the EU... Yes, thank you, sir. The gentleman in the back wants his country back. You've only got a month to wait, my friend. The European Union was set up in the 1950s in a spirit of idealism. We don't deny that after the war. But I think you'd agree it is now a complete anachronism. It was created for a different world. And what we have today bears absolutely no resemblance to the common market that we signed up for in 1972. Yeah. It has changed out of all recognition. It's no coincidence, folks. There is nowhere else on earth where they would dream of doing the kind of experiment that the European Union is currently engaged in, of trying to fuse democracies together into a single country, which is effectively what we're engaged in. There's nowhere else where they have the slightest desire to do so. I was talking the other day to a bunch of Malaysians and explaining what the wonders of our economy, what was going on in London, and they asked me about Brexit and what was going to happen. I said it's going to be fantastic, and they said, tell me what you don't like about the EU. And I said, well, just imagine that you had, in Malaysia, you had an arrangement whereby you had to share democratic control, not just with Singapore, they totally freaked out at that, but also with Vietnam, Cambodia, so Laos, and all the rest of it. And they thought, they looked at me as though I was totally out of my mind. They could not understand how this was going on in the 21st century, when all the movement now is towards devolving power, backwards, downwards, to nations, to regions, not centralizing in this crazy way. And the EU is now producing 2,500 separate bits of regulation every year. It now inspires 60% of all the law passing through the Palace of Westminster, whether you're looking at primary or secondary legislation. And the other day I was making this point, and I complained that there was an EU directive on bananas. And I think actually there are some bananas outside. Some bananas have turned up to protest at what I've got to say. Because the Remain campaign went absolutely, well, bananas, they went wild when I mentioned this. And they said I was wrong. And I looked it up, of course, and I'm afraid I was wrong. There isn't just one directive on bananas. There are 4 directives on bananas. 4 directives on how you can sell bananas, what size the bunches have got to be, and forbidding people, greengrocers in this country, from selling bananas with abnormal curvature of the fingers, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, how preposterous can you get? Do you think that we need the European Union to tell us how powerful our domestic appliances can be? Do we need Brussels to tell us how powerful, or how much suctive power our vacuum cleaners need to have? And I'm prepared to accept that a vacuum cleaner, if incautiously handled, may lead to some people doing themselves an injury in the course of vacuum cleaner abuse. But do we, we have plenty of officials in this country who've consecrated their lives to the safety of electrical appliances. Do we need Brussels to be telling us how powerful our hairdryers have got to be, how long we have to wait before our toast is brown? No, we don't. And of course, it's not a joke. It's not a joke for the many, many thousands of companies across this country. And I've just been today at a fantastic company, Gulf, just near here, where they make these wonderful Ginetta cars. We have more independent car manufacturers in this country than anywhere else on earth. Do you know that? The UK. Absolutely stunning fact. Stunning fact. But, of course, Brussels regulates for the big manufacturers. Brussels regulates as though everybody's Mercedes-Benz or Ford. So the laws that have come from the EU that apply to motor manufacturing are not suitable to the needs of the dynamic and diverse culture of UK motor manufacturing. And I want to move away from that kind of one-size-fits-all approach to the wildly over-prescriptive, and they are taking new powers the whole time. The Lisbon Treaty took colossal new powers, 45 new areas where you can have a qualified majority vote, where the UK government can, the opinions of ministers mandated by Parliament can be overruled by Brussels. And it's happening now the whole time, more and more frequently since in the last 6 years or so, we've been outvoted at an ever-growing rate. And the European Court of Justice, which in Luxembourg, basically set up, we were told, to arbitrate over questions about widgets or what have you, is now deciding whether this country, whether this Home Secretary, whether our government can deport terrorists or criminals. Now, what has that got to do with the operation of a common market? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. They should have nothing to do. The European Union, the Charter of Fundamental Rights should not apply to this country, but the opt-out has proved totally hopeless, as indeed the renegotiation package that we saw earlier this year in February will prove frail and worthless as well, in my view. Now, they talk about the benefits of the single market, my friends. They talk about this wonderful, this mystic, vaunted single market. And what they don't tell you is that over the 20 years since the creation of the single market in 1992, how many countries do you think around the world, not in the single market, saw their exports of goods to the EU increase faster than ours, even though we were in the single market? I'll tell you. There were 27, including America, including Switzerland, who saw faster growth in export of goods. But even more embarrassing and painful for us, loyal members of the single market, subject to every jot and tittle of EU regulation. Do you know how many countries had more exported services faster than we did in those 20 years? Between 1992 and 2012? 21 non-EU countries did better at exporting services, in which we're so brilliant. What is the great virtue and merit of this system, which imposes every week costs of £600 million on UK business? It is no wonder. It is no wonder that the Eurozone and the EU generally is a microclimate of low growth and low innovation. And it is a tragic fact that it's the non-EU countries of the OECD that have done better over the last 20 years than the EU countries. And that is partly, of course,
Write the menu now, Boris. We can all enjoy a full English Brexit.
Fully, the gentleman over there, we're going to get a full English Brexit very, very soon. As I say, only a month to wait, and only a few more minutes, a few more seconds of this speech. The only continent in the world that has had lower growth than the EU, than Europe in the last 8 years is which? Antarctica, exactly right. Now let me ask you a question. Suppose somebody came to you today and they said, listen, we've got this UK, United Kingdom, people of the United Kingdom, we've got this great plan for you. We're going to ask you to sign up for a single market whose economic benefits are frankly vanishing or non-existent. We're going to ask you to accept the continuous erosion of your democratic freedoms, including the right to control your own immigration policy, and we're going to ask you to pay for that at a rate of £20 billion a year. Would anybody join that club today? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it is getting worse. In their desperate attempts to prop up the euro, they're moving, as I say, towards the United States of Europe with common tax, budgetary policy, property law, company law, and if there's one thing that we learned from that renegotiation, that it is utterly pointless to hope that by staying in, we can do anything to reform the EU. Let's vote leave on June the 23rd. And I just point out that, of course, there are some negative spirits around, and we've heard a bit of them today, who say that we can't do it, that we're not strong enough or capable enough. You heard a bit of that today? Yeah. Did you hear the usual nonsense? I would point out that the big difference between them and us is that we actually believe in the capabilities and potential of this country. Yeah. And we believe in what we can do. They want to spread needless apprehension and to run this economy down, and by the way, the net effect of their whole intervention today seems to be to push the FTSE down 20 points. We believe in this country and its economy and its future. And to those who say we can't do it, I say, channeling President Obama, by the way, I say yes we can. And yes we can strike those free trade deals around the world. As soon as we get out, we can strike those free trade deals around the world from which we are currently forbidden. By our EU membership. And we can still be a leading diplomatic and political power and contributor to peace in Europe and around the world. And we can do all those things that matter: cooperation on foreign policy, on defence, on counter-terrorism, on intelligence sharing, on anti-illegal immigration. All that we can do, continue to do. But we do it at an intergovernmental level, don't we? In the way it always used to be done, without the supranational bodies of the Court of Justice and the Commission. And absolutely right, 500 years. And I accept that this is a huge struggle we've now got on, and it is us, the few against the many, it is us hardy little platoons against the big battalions of the CBI and Goldman Sachs, Peter Mandelson, all the people, by the way, all the people who were wrong in the past. They were wrong about leaving the ERM, weren't they? Yes. Totally wrong. They were wrong about joining the euro. Absolutely, they said it would be a disaster if we didn't. Unbelievable. The effrontery they now have to come and present these documents suggesting there's going to be some sort of downturn as a result of getting out of this thing when they were so blatantly wrong in the past. The difference, I think, between them and us is we have the passion and the courage and the sense of duty to speak up, not just for the people in this country, but I think for hundreds of millions of people across Europe who secretly or openly agree with us. And we cannot let those people down. This time this moment, this opportunity will not come again. This is the moment when everybody in this room, everybody in this country, all has one vote. And I think it's the time for all of us to tell the truth to power. And that truth is that we are better, braver, stronger, and greater than those on the other side are currently telling us. And that if we, and that's correct, we are indeed British. And that if we vote leave, on June the 23rd, I believe we will galvanise this country, our economy, and our democracy, and we in this country will prosper and flourish and thrive as never before. Thank you very much all of you. I'm going to take a few questions. The gentleman there, yes, sir.
Can you tell Boris? Tell Barack Obama to mind their own bloody business.
Well, the only point I would make about the President of the United States.
War for 2 years after the bloody stand.
Yes, I thought it was odd that we were being told to get to the back of the queue when the United States was very keen to see us at the front of the queue when it came to war in Iraq or wherever it happened to be. I thought that was very striking. I also thought it was odd that the United States should be urging us to pool our sovereignty, to enter into relationships that erode our democracy, our democratic freedom, in a way that they would never dream of doing in the United States. The United States hasn't even signed up to the UN Convention on the Law of the Child, for heaven's sake. Let alone the International Criminal Court or many other international bodies. The US jealously guards their sovereignty. It was weird that we were being told to give up ours by the United States. Yes, sir. And then I'll come to you.
Anyways, first off, thanks for coming here to speak. It's nice to see you in the flesh. I've actually been told by people before that I share a resemblance with you. So
you're considerably better than me, my friend. Don't worry.
So my question relates to subsidies, which obviously is a large criticism of Brussels, and especially in farming, where they're renowned for being very high. And I read that currently in the UK, farming subsidies are around the income of farmers in the UK is around 50 or 60% from subsidies. So my question is, if Brexit were to take place, would you like to see those subsidies reduced and then making those farmers non-profitable, or would you rather them be kept on a high level?
No, thank you very much. That's a question I've been asked more or less every day for the last few months. We are determined on our side of the argument to continue to support farming and the rural economy. And that means making sure that farmers get the equivalent of the single farm payment plus all the other payments that they get for rural stewardship schemes or whatever it happens to be. It's a no-brainer for our country. We have to support our agriculture. It's a vital part of our way of life. And it would be a crying shame if we failed to do that. What we can do, and we'll be able to do that, of course, because we'll have, I think from the top of my head, we contribute to the agriculture budget alone, to the FIOGA funds, as they used to be called. We contribute about £5.5 billion sterling. We get about £3.5 billion back. We would have more money left over to support the rural economy and as well, of course, as many other priorities. We have we'd have a huge amount coming back anyway in the form of the money we'd save on all the other money that's spent, the UK cash that's spent around Europe. But we'd also be able to stop some of the nonsensical bureaucracy for farmers. Why is it that when a sheep has 2 teeth, for instance, they want to slaughter it, they have to do some ludicrous procedure where they remove the spine or whatever? Why are they told that they have to, if they have more than 30 acres, they have to rotate 3 crops or more. Thank you very much. I thought that point would go down well with at least somebody. There is all that, and the form filling is crazy. The stipulations about how far your fences have got to be from your trees and all this sort of malarkey. Thank you. I think that also went down. Look, this is Britain. We do not. We've been farming here a long time. We don't need to be told this kind of thing. We can continue to have free trade. And by the way, anybody who's worried about, whether we'll still be able to buy, all vital supplies like French champagne or whatever. Will there be tariffs? Of course there won't be tariffs on that. Why on earth should they have? Why should they put tariffs on our goods, after all, when they export, I think, about £18 billion worth of food and drink to us, and we export £8 billion worth to them? The trade is very much at the moment in their favour. Free trade is going to continue. Free trade is going to continue. As, and I pay tribute to him, not for the first time today, as David Cameron rightly said, the people were greatly, there was a risk of scaremongering, he said, and there was no doubt that Britain could prosper outside the EU and that we would be able to do free trade deals. That's what he said only a few months ago. Something seems to have intervened in his calculations. I don't know exactly what it is, but he was right. He was maybe it's the polls, but he was right. He was right there. Yes, sir. Would it be feasible to rejoin EFTA? Well, unfortunately, remember the European Free Trade Association, which we founded in 1973, and which still, I think, was it 4? I can't remember whether it's 3 or 4. The tragedy is, of course, that as soon as the UK joined the common market, as it then was, a lot of the wind went out of EFTA's sails, and slowly since then, most of the EFTA countries have joined the EU. I think, obviously, Norway is still out, Switzerland is still out. I think we should just get out and do a free trade arrangement. That's what I think. Well, I think that following a British vote to leave, there will be a mood of sudden excitement and euphoria in many parts of Europe, because somebody finally would have told them the emperor's got no clothes, and there'll be a lot of support for coming to. In many countries, I think there'll be a lot of support for coming to some new arrangement. People are worried about I don't think this would be the EU as a whole would break up. I think the crucial thing is the relationship between France and Germany. But there's massive potential now for a commonsensical reform of the whole structure of Europe, and as you say, something like a return to a wider free trade area might well happen. Yes.
Please.
I'm going to come back to you. Yes, lady in the blue.
Thank you. What are we going to do about Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish nationalists who might help to sink our ship?
Well, I don't think that they will help to sink our ship. I think that it was the prospect of being partly ruled by Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish nationalists, together with Ed Miliband, that ensured that there was a Conservative majority government at the last election. And that was one of the decisive things. If you mean, will they use a Brexit vote as an excuse to trigger another Scottish referendum, I think that's very, very unlikely indeed. In fact, I don't think that will happen. It's just because there has already been a very recent referendum on Scottish membership of the United Kingdom. The result was very clear. I don't think there's going to be any appetite in Parliament to have another referendum on that subject. That was a once in a generation, once in a lifetime moment, and it's coming on.
I meant if the Scottish nationalists vote to stay, there'll be too many of them in Scotland. I know they're only a small country.
Oh, I see. Well, I think we're a United Kingdom is my answer to that. I think we're a United Kingdom. But we'll see. It's perfectly possible, by the way. The Scots might vote to leave.
Yeah.
And we might vote
That
to
would be
stay.
good, yeah.
What would happen there? What if we left on the back of Scottish Leave votes? Well, I'd take it. I think we're going to get to Joe in the front. Yes, sir.
I'm just interested, because you do talk about full sovereignty a lot, what your stance on the European Convention of Human Rights is, because obviously you signed up to that through the Human Rights Act, which is obviously written British law, it's in our constitution.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, the European Convention of Human Rights was written by English civil servants.
Absolutely right.
So, what's your stance on that?
Very, very good question. Everybody hear the question? What's my stance on the European Convention on Human Rights?
We wrote it.
We wrote it, and actually, I'm a supporter of it. I think it was one of the great things we gave to Europe, and it was under Winston Churchill. It was a fine idea in the post-war environment. Now, I'm not against the European Convention or indeed the court, because it's very important to realize that the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights do not have to be applied either by the UK courts or by the UK Parliament. But the judgments of the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg do. And the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg is supreme, as everybody knows, under the 1972 European Communities Act. It is the supreme legislative body judicial body in this country. And the problem now is that the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, the EU court, is adjudicating on the 55 articles of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which was put in the Lisbon Treaty against UK wishes. And after we were told that we had an opt-out, as I say, which turned out to be utterly valueless. So what we need to do is get out of the EU, it's that European Court of Justice that is taking these decisions over which we cannot oppose. We cannot oppose by law to stop us deporting terrorists and criminals and so on. So that would be my answer to you. Keep the European Convention. It's a fine thing. Get out of the EU and out from under the new supranational arbitration of the European Court of Justice. That's what I would do. Yes.
Following a vote, how long would it take before we would realistically have control?
We would instantly be able we could amend the European Communities Act 1972 to address the very question I was just mentioning. So we could start straight away by pointing out that ensuring that our Parliament, our courts were sovereign again. I don't think it would be necessary to trigger Article 50, as people often mention. The immediate impact would be, I think, very positive politically, but what you would see is, over time, a very exciting process of looking at trade deals we could do around the world from which we're currently forbidden, and of course starting to legislate for the good of our own people and our own economy. And you'd see changes on our immigration policy and many other things. So I think we have absolutely nothing to fear but fear itself. And I appreciate that the Remain side are going around trying to stoke up as much fear as they possibly can, but I think we're bigger and better and braver than that. And it will be a moment of release. I think that what will happen on June the 24th is a sense of euphoria and independence, and we will gradually work our way forward with new trade deals and a new approach to legislation out from under the incubus of the European system, of the supranational system. Now, the longer I go on, the more questions there are. How many? Yes?
Quick one. As I was arriving this evening, the political broadcast was on Vote Leave, and it was very competent, but a little boring. And I'm an accountant.
And you're an accountant.
The stuff you're saying about ridiculing the EU, which I think that is the way to describe it. I think it is a some very dignified humour in the campaign might
Yeah.
actually swing people in Britain a bit more.
Well, thank you very much for that. I mean, I think that all such comments and really gratefully received. I thought it was pretty good. This is a very serious matter. We have to get our points across. People crave information. They crave answers. Although I try to make things sound as interesting and amusing as I can, sometimes people just want to know what the facts are. And we're doing our best to get those facts across. And that's one of the reasons why, when you look at our leaflet in the Electoral Commission stuff, it's very deadpan. I think that's on us. I think that's to our advantage. I think people are taking this very seriously. They want to know the reality, and they will make up their minds on the basis of those facts. And I think we will win that way. I think in a way, boredom is our friend. Boredom is our friend. We will win by grinding away and getting our message across. And yes.
President Trump would renegotiate the Paris Agreement because it was unfair to America. The current state of our energy is such that it repulses industry rather than attracts, because it's intermittent, it's lack of energy.
Yeah.
And that's directly as a consequence of EU
Cheers.
green. Who say Britain's winning, stick in turbines and they're useless.
Yeah. Well,
We've got to get back to a proper energy policy.
well, we've got a crazy energy policy at the moment where with the disaster. I mean, look at what's happening at Port Talbot with the steelworkers who are in danger of losing all their jobs. We can't. And Scunthorpe. We can't cut the energy costs. We can't cut the energy costs for those parts of British industry because Brussels says no. And that's not because, even though UK energy costs are much higher than energy costs around the rest of the EU, or much higher than the average, how crazy is that? How crazy is that? If we get out, we can do that. We can cut costs of fuel, for instance, of VAT on fuel.
We need to compete in the world.
Completely right. Completely right. What the paradox is? Because of the EU system, we can't even correct our own mistakes. That is absolutely crazy and criminal, in my view. Anyway, listen, I think how many questions were you asked? Come on, yes, last, come on.
This is maybe not as political as what everybody's been talking about, but I'm a big animal advocate
Yes.
in horses.
Yes.
And I'm greatly interested in us banning the live
Yes.
transportation of all animals, particularly horses.
Yes.
Over.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes.
But I'd be led to believe that if we leave the EU, that our government would back that. But I've been told that the EU is actually blocking that.
That's completely right. That is completely. Did everyone hear the question?
No.
It's about the transport of live animals across the channel, for you to go from Shoreham on Sea and other places. There is still actually quite a considerable trade, and I think it's awful. My father, funnily enough, was one of those 20 or 30 years ago who was really trying to campaign against it, and he found that he could do nothing about it because under EU rules it has to be protected because it's cross-frontier shipment of goods. And even though the British people were against it, the Minister for Agriculture could do nothing to stop it, and that was completely wrong, in my view. And you take back control. Of course you can do things like stopping the shipment of live animals, including horses, for slaughter across the channel.
On this point is the slaughterhouses. That is a big issue for me as well, and the halal meat that we have in this country, which is completely against what I believe in totally.
Yes.
Slaughterhouses
Right.
is an issue as well. The lobstering of animals.
Okay.
We all want to eat meat properly. I don't know. I don't.
Right.
But
Meat, yeah.
lobstering of animals is what's extremely horrible, cruel, and in the 21st century,
Yes. Okay, did everybody hear the question? It's a tricky one about the non-stunning of animals in slaughterhouses, and there are, I think both Shikita, both Judaism and Islam have certain requirements there which have to be observed pretty carefully if you're not to have unnecessary cruelty, and there's plenty of legislation under UK statute to stop that, and we would make sure that continue. I think that the practices in question can be done safely and humanely, provided you follow certain guidelines. And, well, well, at the moment the law is set at an EU level. You're quite right. But as far as I understand it, there are protections to make sure that the animals are not treated inhumanely. What the problem is that in some slaughterhouses those rules are flouted, and we need to crack down on that. Look, folks, I think we've done pretty well. We're now on animal welfare. Should we take one last question? The gentleman in the back with the beard, sir.
Thank you. Our armed forces. Our armed forces. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Our armed forces and our police take an oath to the sovereign, to the Queen, to uphold the law and to effect their duties fairly and without bias and without favour. What would you do upon coming out of the EU, God willing, to reinstitute their sovereign oath so that they are not being politically puppeted from Europe and can execute their duties according to their oath, because at the moment they are compromised and on many technicalities are committing acts of sovereign treason in upholding EU law?
Well, I agree. I mean, it's very important that the police do swear an oath of loyalty to the sovereign. That's very, very important. I remember actually in being in a committee back 20 years and years ago, 15 years ago, making sure that we kept that. In the House, making sure that we kept that oath. The thing that really worries me is what's happening on defence. And there is unquestionably a move. It's a long-standing project of the EU to create a kind of mailed fist of the European Union, a common defence force, a common defence policy, and that I think is absolutely crackers. We don't need it. And it's another example of how this thing is trying to evolve into a United States of Europe. And all it will do is sow confusion and doubt and undermine the NATO alliance, which has been for the last 60 years the guarantor of peace in Europe. And all the nonsense about security and stability being guaranteed by the EU, absolute codswallop. It was NATO that did it. And I remember vividly when they said this. Do you remember when the war in the Balkans broke out? And they said this is the hour of Europe. You remember? And it was all put in the hands of the former Luxembourg foreign minister, a guy called Jacques Pousse. And it was a fiasco. And about 1 million people died. I mean, it's no joke. 1 million people died in the course of that appalling conflict until NATO came in and you had Holford and all the rest of it, the Dayton Accords, and the Americans took it very, very seriously, and the Serbs were got back under control. But that was the disaster of trying to treat the EU as in any way responsible for maintaining or guaranteeing peace, and I want to make sure, and that's why I'm apprehensive, and so are many people both in Washington and to be fair in London as well, about the EU's pretensions to have a defence dimension. It's a very, very bad idea. And listen, I think we've really got to knock this on the head. I'm getting some people are doing like that from the back. We've got to go, folks. Thank you very, very much, all of you.